But first, our top story takes us to John Kingston, our resident diesel expert, talking about fuel and if the winter is looking like it's getting a little bit closer to spring when it comes to prices. John, thank you for joining us. We know that we had that massive cold snap last weekend, and did it really do anything to drive up fuel prices, or did we see some kind of stability coming out of that?
I think, first of all, I want to say that this is the top story. It just kind of amazes me. Right now, fuel prices are just boring. They're dull, and we wouldn't have thought that. As you're right, you're right. We had a big cold snap here. You've got a hot war. You got a couple of hot wars really going on in the Middle East, one that's having massive effect on a key waterway. And the price of oil is doing really nothing. The trend has been down. To kick things off, the Department of Energy EIA price that's used for most fuel surcharges was down 3.5 cents when it was posted on Monday. Actually, down 2.5 cents. It was up 3.5 cents. So it's almost kind of flat from where it was a couple of weeks ago. It's been down 14 out of 18 weeks. Last week, every Friday I post on my X feed, my Twitter feed, a chart of what ultra low sulfur diesel on the CME commodity exchange did in the prior week. And the one I posted last week was about the most boring one I've ever done. The price went nowhere. We just seem to be in this equilibrium despite all these external things that you would think might be driving the price higher. Now, to your point about winter, and this is the story I wrote on Monday, in some ways, in terms of heating oil, winter is kind of over. Right now, it is January 24th. On February 1st, the first month contract on the ultra low sulfur diesel contract on CME, which is essentially also a proxy for heating oil, will switch to March barrels. So you're trading February barrels now. By this point, you've really consumed a lot of what you normally consume. I know that you've got really looking at the forecast for the New York area, which is really, again, kind of a proxy, come to that word again, for heating oil consumption, since heating oil is mostly used in the Northeast. I mean, you've got high temperatures into the 40s really until like February 4th right now in the long-range forecast. And, we could get a really nasty spike in February that will send the price temporarily higher, both for heating oil and for diesel. But I think the whole idea of coming into winter saying, oh, no, what if we have a bad winter? It's going to drive the price of heating oil and by extension, the price of diesel. That's behind us. You might get a few days, but the idea that you're going to have some winter from hell that's going to drive up the price of diesel, that issue is, I think it's done.
So this, of course, begs the question, where do the folks who are the consumers of this diesel, your drivers, your fleets, where's their headspace with all of this, right? Because we know that last year about this time, people were still wondering, how am I going to make it through with these continued high diesel prices? And now, as you mentioned, we've seen what is basically 12 consecutive months of declines. What does their thought process look like going into this? And is there a point where they get maybe a little trepidatious, saying, is this too good to last?
Well, yeah, if you're an owner-operator, you always think that there's some disaster around the corner. But look, you because of the situation in the Middle East, everything is kind of on hold. And I shouldn't just say the Middle East, because you did have a Ukrainian drone attack on a Russian key export point, a petroleum export point in the last week, too. So it's not just the Middle East, obviously Russia, Ukraine. But we're coming up to 2 years on Russia, Ukraine, and it never had the long-term impact that we thought it was going to have. All the models for 2024, the International Energy Agency, OPEC itself, whatever, on the margin, they're not all in agreement about the supply-demand balance, but nobody shows a particularly tight market this year. And you also have to remember that with OPEC and OPEC Plus having made so many cuts back in production, that if the price really did start to rise for whatever reason, there is a fair amount of spare capacity sitting on the sidelines that could be brought into play. Now, the Saudis want higher prices, but the Saudis traditionally don't want too high prices, because if the price gets too high, you do two things. You encourage new production elsewhere, and that's certainly been an issue for OPEC this year with the U.S. and Guyana and Brazil producing a lot more oil. I shouldn't say this year, last year too. And you also start to encourage substitution of other alternatives like electric vehicles for oil. So they don't like to get it too high. The danger time always comes when you've got a really tight market and there's not a lot of spare capacity. Right now, there is a good amount of spare capacity because the cuts in the OPEC Plus nations have been fairly steep. So I think we're kind of sitting at a good point. And I don't know if I was, if I was an owner operator, I don't know that diesel markets or diesel prices should be high on the list of things I'm going to worry about. Yeah, they're always going to worry about them. I just don't know how much they need to worry about them.
So, John, we've talked about the situation going on in the Middle East, the continued tensions between the Red Sea, and of course the conflict in Israel-Palestine too. But I also want to touch a little bit on what's going on with the liquefied petroleum products market when it comes to exports out of the U.S. and that traverse through the Panama Canal. We know that we are entering the true dry season of Panama, but we actually saw transits on the canal increase a little bit between November to December. Are shippers still particularly worried about getting their U.S. exports out of these products and getting them through the canal, or are they seeing maybe a light at the end of the tunnel that way?
Yeah, I just want to clarify something. I mean, yeah, there are liquefied petroleum gas exports, that's LPG, but I think what you're referring to mostly are LNG, yes. Liquefied natural gas. It's a good question, and I will be honest with you, I don't know the answer. I have not really seen any concerns. I think I did see something where they're starting to look at the idea of offloading at one end, and there's a pipeline there that can transport the gas through it and then reload it at the other end. Though I don't know if they've got the facilities to do that, whether the liquefied natural gas would stay liquefied during that journey. But yeah, I think we all agree that the Panama Canal, I mean, you've got these really low levels at the Panama Canal. It's only the world's second biggest canal problem, right? Because the Suez Canal is an even bigger problem, given the issues in the Red Sea. So, yeah, there are issues out there. But remember, none of this really affects supply. I mean, the amount of available supply. It does affect steaming time. And when the steaming time is lengthened, effectively, you're putting more into inventory for longer. And that is bullish. But it just hasn't happened yet. You haven't seen it in the market yet. You just wonder if this is one of those things where the market's going to wake up one day and it's going to react to everything. As far as I will say this, natural gas in the last 5 or 6 days in the U.S. absolutely plummeted in price, really because of this weather forecast and the fact that it looks like we're just going to get through another winter without a real squeeze. So if you have to tie up LNG supplies longer, yeah, that's bullish for LNG, but you kind of got winter behind you.
So, John, of course, we're headed towards the end of the week. You've got Drilling Deep coming up on Friday. Can you give us a little sneak peek of your show?
Well, Drilling Deep is coming to an end as of this Friday. It's the last one as we here at Freightways move on to other things. And I knew, as soon as I knew I had the last one, I knew who I wanted to have on. And it's Todd Amen, the president of ATBS. I've been interviewing Todd every year right around April 15th because Todd processes thousands of independent owner-operator, small fleet tax returns. So he gets a real bird's eye view into what drivers made in the prior year. And I had it in my head to have him back in April. And when I knew that I didn't going to have all that time, I said, I got to get him here early. So Todd will be our final guest on Drilling Deep this week. Maybe it'll come back. Who knows? But for now, it's coming to it'll be ending a more than 4-year run when it shuts down at the end of this week.
Well, we love the work that you put into that, and we appreciate it. And we will catch that final episode on Friday at 3 o'clock. Thanks for joining us, John, and we will see you then.
Thank you, Kaylee.